All right, we're about to dive into one of the most sobering, most intense passages in all of the prophetic books, Jeremiah chapter 15, specifically the first 9 verses. This passage describes a divine judgment that is so final, so absolute, that it really represents a point of no return for the kingdom of Judah. Let's break down what's going on here.
Right out of the gate, the passage just drops this bombshell. There's no buildup, no warning. It's just this shocking, final declaration from God. And the key to understanding just how severe this is, well, it's all in those 2 names that God brings up, Moses and Samuel.
You see, this opening verse isn't a warning at all. It's a sentence being handed down. The time for negotiation, for mercy, for someone to step in and plead their case, that time is over. And the finality of it is sealed by mentioning the 2 people who God says would be powerless to change his mind.
Now, these names carry some serious weight. I mean, think about it. Moses was the ultimate intercessor. He's the one who literally stood between God's wrath and the people after the whole golden calf fiasco and convinced God not to wipe them out. And Samuel, the great prophet judge, who prayed the nation back from the brink when the Philistines were about to crush them. These were the heavyweights of prayer, the absolute champions of turning judgment into mercy.
So the point God is making is devastatingly clear. He's saying that even if you brought in the 2 most effective, most successful advocates in Israel's entire history, and they stood right here pleading for Judah, the answer would still be no. A covenantal point of no return has been crossed. That command to cast them out of my sight, that is the language of exile. The verdict is in and the case is closed.
So with intercession completely off the table, the passage shifts gears and starts to lay out the very specific punishments that are about to unfold. Jeremiah anticipates the people's question, and you can just feel the desperation in it. Where are we supposed to go? It's a cry for some kind of direction in the middle of all this chaos. But the answer they get isn't a place, it's a destiny.
And what we see here is this terrifying, methodical order inside the chaos. God decrees 4 grim fates: death, likely by plague, the sword of battle, famine from the coming siege, and captivity for whoever is left. This wasn't just symbolic language, these were the classic, brutal outcomes of ancient warfare. And historically, this is exactly what happened to Judah during the Babylonian campaigns that ultimately destroyed Jerusalem in 586 BC.
And if you thought that was bad, verse 3 just cranks up the horror. It's not just about how you die, but what happens to you after you die. The sword is just the beginning. After that, the dogs, the birds, the wild animals, they'll desecrate the bodies. Now, you have to understand, in that culture, a proper burial was absolutely essential. To deny someone that was the ultimate act of shame and degradation.
And here's the thing. This horrific imagery wasn't coming out of nowhere. This is the exact kind of language you find in the covenant curses that were laid out centuries before in books like Leviticus and Deuteronomy. So Jeremiah is basically saying, remember those warnings, the ones we ignored for generations? Well, this is it. This is them coming true.
So the big question is, why? Why was the judgment so final, so irreversible? Well, verse 4 gives us a very specific and very historical reason.
You see, Judah had its good moments, like under the righteous king Hezekiah, but his son Manasseh took the throne and reigned for over half a century, and in that time he systematically and brutally undid every single positive reform his father had made. He plunged the nation into a spiritual darkness so deep that it seems it could never fully recover.
And according to the book of 2 Kings, Manasseh's sins were on a whole other level. He didn't just build idols out in the countryside, he brought them into the very temple of God in Jerusalem. He practiced child sacrifice, he filled the streets with so much innocent blood. His long, corrupting reign embedded this evil so deeply into the fabric of the nation that even the efforts of later reformers couldn't root it all out. His sin sealed Judah's fate.
And this divine verdict had a very real, very human consequence on the ground. It meant complete and total abandonment.
Jeremiah asks these 3 just gut-wrenching rhetorical questions. Who's going to feel sorry for you, Jerusalem? Who's going to mourn for you? Who's even going to bother to stop by and just ask how you're doing? And the implied answer is just chilling. No one.
And this wasn't just a spiritual feeling, it was a hard geopolitical reality. After the Babylonians crushed the Egyptians at the Battle of Carchemish, all those little regional alliances that Judah might have been counting on just fell apart. Jerusalem was left totally isolated,
spiritually cut off from God and politically all alone, facing the Babylonian superpower.
And then we get this incredible line in verse 6 from God's own perspective. He says, "I am weary with repenting." Now, what on earth does that mean? How can God get weary?
Okay, this is a really important theological point. It doesn't mean God made a mistake or regrets a decision. In this context, repenting is more like relenting or holding back. For centuries, God had shown incredible patience, delaying judgment over and over again when the people showed even a little bit of remorse. But now, he's saying that patience has run out. The cycle of rebellion, warning, and last-minute mercy, it's over. The divine restraint has finally reached its limit.
And the judgment is described with this really vivid farming metaphor in verse 7. God says he will fan his people at the gates of the land. Now, a winnowing fan was a tool used to throw harvested grain into the air. The wind would blow away the light, worthless chaff, while the heavier grain fell back down. It is a perfect and brutal image for the people of Judah being forcibly separated and scattered into exile.
The final verses of this section are just devastating. They describe the complete and utter collapse of the nation's future. If there was any little spark of hope left, well, it's about to be stamped out for good. I mean, just listen to the scale of the demographic collapse in verse 8. The number of widows will be greater than the grains of sand on the seashore. Just try to picture that. This isn't just about losing a battle. This is about the annihilation of an entire generation of men.
And then you get this phrase, a spoiler at noonday, which really drives home the terror of that final assault. See, an attack at night is sneaky. An attack at high noon, that's just raw, overwhelming power. It's bold, it's shocking, and it implies an attack so sudden and so overpowering that there's absolutely no time to prepare and no chance to escape.
But the poetic climax, the most heartbreaking line in the whole passage, is this one. Her sun is gone down while it was yet day. A sunset is natural. It's the expected end of the day. But for the sun to just disappear at noon, that is an unnatural catastrophe. It means hope hasn't just faded away, it's been violently and prematurely extinguished. The light of the nation has gone out.
So to quickly recap what we've just walked through, you have this deep, generational sin, really cemented into the culture by King Manasseh. This leads to an irreversible verdict from God, where even the greatest intercessors are powerless. A methodical destruction is then unleashed: war, famine, exile. And the final result? The total extinguishing of national hope when Jerusalem finally falls.
It is an incredibly heavy passage, no doubt about it, but it leaves us with this profound and, frankly, timeless question. While this was a very specific judgment on ancient Judah, the principle behind it still resonates. How does any society, any culture, or even any one of us recognize the signs that we are approaching our own point of no return, a point where the consequences of our choices finally become inevitable?